Yes. Welcome to Rope's podcast, and today we have a special guest in here. His name go by the name Stevie. Okay, Stevie, welcome.
Okay.
Welcome to Rope's podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And today we will be talking about mental health and how it affects the black community. And Stevie, now gonna pick your brain, and you're gonna tell us all you know about mental health. But first, you're gonna have to tell me about yourself.
Oh wow. So I'm a mental health wellbeing practitioner and recently qualified, but I've been working in mental health for the past 5 years. And I started my Leffluence this year, and the aim of Leffluence is to help deal with the challenges that we as people of colour face in mental health and offer a variety of services to them. So currently I offer a support group exclusively just for black men, women and individuals aged 18 or over. I also offer one-to-one therapy as well, where I deal with interventions like building self-confidence, PTSD stabilization, things like that. Eventually I do want to offer more services like retreats, wellness, residentials, workshops as well. So these are just many things that we do need to help kind of combat the stigma that us as a community, not only black people, but everybody faces.
Okay, so are you getting sponsors to do this?
Currently it's just me at the moment. It's just me. I recently registered as a social enterprise. So the process for that, in getting sponsors, in getting any form of donations, you have to evidence your work and benefit to the community as well. But I am in the process of getting some funding.
Okay, that's good because you know, not long ago just left university. Yeah, so it's nice for you to give back to your community, but because our community really needs it.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna talk about PTSD and what PTSD stands for, and we're gonna also talk about EUPD, right? And we're gonna stick with those two topics today because we know when we start to get into mental health, it's a long list along the line. Yeah. So first, what is PTSD?
PTSD, so that stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's a mental health condition that affects a lot of people who go through very difficult situations that in some way, shape or form affect how they navigate life. So in our community, we would have seen a lot of experiences that would have affected us. So for example, if you're a young person in London, aged between 10 to 18 years old, you're going to have probably been in situations that are pretty violent. So it's not just stabbings or fights or things like that. There's also abuses that happen within the family. So when you're hit or when you're in a situation like a fire, for example. So to use a personal experience, my family went through a house fire, and in that you have it's very kind of stressful on the body experiencing something like that. So what tends to happen is your mind is now like, okay, I need to try and cope with this, and it will do this thing that we call compartmentalization. So you'll just put it away for a bit. But then what ends up happening is that your body, after you've dealt with that experience, what ends up happening is your body's now gone, oh wait, this has happened to you. So you're now kind of getting triggered by things. So like a fire alarm, if you're just cooking bacon on the stove, will just set you off because you're remembering that frightening experience where you were literally facing something. And that's what happened with my family, is the trauma and effect of experiencing something so devastating can be so impactful.
Okay. And so what is EUPD?
EUPD is a personality disorder, and it is quite common in women. It stands for emotionally unstable personality disorder, or it's better known as borderline personality disorder. And it's common. So how that looks like, it's a personality disorder that deals with the intensity of emotions, and how it kind of affects everybody is that sometimes when you're dealing with someone who just might be incredibly aggressive, they might have very volatile relationships. So you might see them being aggressive or rude to their partners, family members. They might sometimes make up lies or really try and be controlling in their behaviour. You might in some ways see them be very insecure, or have very powerful delusions of grandeur. Like, so they might on one hand see themselves as incredibly attractive, and then on another, I'm incredibly ugly, and try to justify that. There's sometimes no in between with how that looks.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna just throw some random questions at you, and then we get into the more PSTD and things like that.
Yeah.
We get it on a level. Okay, how does one stop depression and anxiety? Which culture of people does it affect most?
It does affect. So to answer your question, so stopping depression and anxiety comes through a variety of treatments. So when it comes to trying to deal with it on your own, in terms of a mild to moderate way, it is sometimes to do with what's happening in your life at that point. So if I'm going through an assessment with a patient and they come to me and say, Stephen, I'm depressed because of work, then 9 times out of 10 it's what's happening at work that's affecting how you manage your mood. And so it could be that they're very overwhelmed with their workload. It could be that they're getting a lot of pressure from their boss about a particular deadline. It could be that in some way, shape or form that there's a lot of things happening in their lives that affects them. So, but instead of kind of dealing with that issue, it doesn't really it kind of just weighs heavily and it builds up, so they don't really have an outlet. So they're probably not eating healthy or sleeping, they're not in any way, shape or form dealing with their feelings well enough or thoughts on how they manage their stress. So sometimes that can affect it, but there's also other things that can make you depressed. So like you could go for a breakup or divorce, your child could be sick, your house could be there's many things that can cause depression.
Okay, Stephen, we all go through a little bit of depression at times, and we're living in a multicultural society.
Yeah.
And sometimes lack of jobs, even having jobs and being to work sometimes depress us. Racism.
Yeah.
Bills.
Yeah.
So is that say that we are crazy or we have a mental issue?
No, it's not. Because if you are depressed because of those experiences, because those are very harsh experiences to go through. So as a black man growing up in London, there's always this kind of perception given to people that there's no racism in London. You will experience racism. People will discriminate against you because of the way you look. And that can make you depressed because sometimes you will really overthink or enumerate, is what we call it at work, about what did I do to this person or these people to treat me this way. So when you say racism, especially in the black community, how that affects us in the workspace, you might be getting judged a lot more harshly than your peers. So in the NHS, for example, there was recently a case of a woman who got awarded like £25,000 when she was a nurse, and she spoke to her supervisor and said to them that listen, this patient's been really racially abusive to. She was a black woman, and her supervisor said, well, considering the way that you look, I can understand why they think that way. And some people may look at that supervisor and go, how dare you say something like that? But some of the people that work in our healthcare system, that work as members of the police, fire brigade, do not live amongst our communities. They're just visitors. They live in villages. They don't interact with black people or any other minorities on a regular basis. And in such, they do unknowingly or knowingly cause trauma to us, and that can make us depressed. Okay.
How does mental health impact the family?
So that's a very difficult question to summarize and answer, but how it impacts the family is, speaking as a black man, we're often put in positions, and I'm a black Caribbean man at that, we're often put in positions where we feel like we have to provide for everyone in our family. But as you just highlighted, that there's many things in life at the moment that can happen to you. And one of the things that sometimes men struggle to do is basically just talk or express that I'm really finding things difficult. And we really struggle with saying I'm not okay, or that I'm struggling with managing everything or how to share their burdens or that workload or work in genuine partnership with their family. So what tends to happen is they can isolate themselves. They won't isolate themselves. They can be very frustrated or aggressive unknowingly. They might lash out unintentionally. In some cases, it can look like, so for example, if a child was to come in here and they knocked over the bottle of water and it spilled all over the carpet, it's just a baby, they're playing, and then if it on a calm level, they'll be like, oh, that wouldn't bother me. But they'll just grab the child and just lash out because they haven't been dealing internally with their emotions. And that's just one of the small ways in which someone can be impacted by their mental health.
Okay. How does it affect the black man?
As I was saying before, it affects the black man in the sense of, well, the figures clearly state that one, that there's a lot of black men that are sectioned under Mental Health Act, especially because one, we don't know how to notice that we're not okay. So, for example, if you have a black man who's suffering hallucinations, so he's feeling and experiencing the world that's completely different from everybody else around him, he's not going to know how to relate to everyone else. So it's like so let's say you, like how you and me are having this conversation right now, and I are saying to you, oh, like I'm feeling very stressed and I've been feeling like someone's crawling on me, can you see something on me? But that's what I'm feeling, but you're like, no, not bothering you, it shouldn't be bothering you. Some men don't know how to say, okay, you know what, I might need to go speak to someone else about this because I know what I'm experiencing. But they don't do that. They kind of just sit with it on their own and say, you know what, I'll just get through it. But slowly, over time, it deteriorates and affects because now you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're getting aggressive with your family and friends, you're not performing at work, you're not taking part in your hobbies, you're getting anxious about dealing with people. So there's a lot that affects how we navigate our mental health as black men.
Okay. So in your workshop, do you find a lot of young black men come through to say that I'm suffering from mental health? Because time gone, mental health used to be a taboo subject. When some people talk about mental health, they tell, okay, he's crazy, he's mad, he's undeemable, he need to go into a section hospital. And give me your experience, what you get in your workshop.
In my workshop, when it comes to black men, specifically around how they do, a lot of them do step in quite vulnerably. Like I've only ever had, I think, one black man attend. Yeah, it's been mostly black women that are very receptive to exploring their mental health. But on a one-to-one level, I do have black men that do reach out to kind of
talk to you on the phone.
Yeah, talk to me or meet with me for an assessment or explore things. But then those assessments don't really go far because there's a reluctance in some way, shape or form to kind of delve further into their emotions. So, what the black men that I've encountered so far in my practice.
Okay. Okay, who gets PTSD? Who get it?
Anyone can get it. Practically anyone can get it. So PTSD, like I said, it's from traumatic experiences. So if you're someone that's been abused, or you're someone, it doesn't even have to be something as dramatic as abuse. It could be a very stressful event. So for example, if you've been in a car crash, and the very thought of getting in the back of a car might seem ridiculous to some people, but it's a frightening experience because for you, the last time I got into a car, it's giving up that sense of safety. I feel unsafe is the general thing. And I think with some men and women, but some men in particular, they struggle with the concept of what do I need to feel safe or emotionally safe or mentally safe. We know what physical safety looks like for us, but mental and emotional safety is something that we find challenging to actually deal with and recognize.
We're here with Stephen, and we're talking about mental health in the black community and how can we get help and who does it affect. Okay, does kids got mental issues as well?
They can unknowingly. So
And is it the same symptoms where a man being through or a lady being through that kids go through the same thing?
No, because the children. So, for example, now children aren't my area of expertise. I deal mostly with adults. But what I can say, for example, is if with children, what tends to kind of happen with them is it depends on what's happening in their general environment. But nowadays, especially in our generation, is that a lot of parents are taking very great care to ensure that their children don't have experience a lot of trauma or bad experiences at home. So there's no arguments taking place at home. There's no physical fights. There's no abuse, things like that. But that's at the home environment. There's also when they go to school. There's when they're going to and from school. So you have so for example, that young girl who lost her life because of that young man when he was trying to offer her flowers, Helene. And I always think about that because we're like, okay, what could we have done in that situation to kind of guide?
Yeah, but Stephen, sorry to cut you, but growing up in the Caribbean and growing up in a Caribbean parents' home, we hear a little rumbling now and then. But it doesn't affect we, because we don't say it's just normal for people to have a little dispute and have shout at each other and load up each other but it never really affect the kids. So why now these kids these kind of things start to affect these kids them now?
Because perhaps we didn't have that space to actually say, you know what, I don't like how you're dealing. Like for me, luckily in my family we're very vocal about how we feel about something. But one thing but in other families that might not be the case. So they really struggle with expressing, you know what, Mum, I don't like the way you hit me, you know. Or Mum, I don't like the way you talk to me sometimes. And whilst in our culture might view that as, who do you think you're talking to? You can't talk to me like that. But it's not that or even your child is saying to you in any way, shape or form that I'm defying you as my parent. What I'm saying to you is, I'm showing you my boundary as a developing adult. I don't like the way you're doing.
Yeah, but I understand that as an adult, you want your parents to talk to you on a level.
Yeah.
But as a child, sometimes you have to tell a child 10 times not to touch this, not to move this, not to play with this. And a child will do it. And then the parents will raise his voice at the child. Because the parents cannot hit the child. So he just raises his voice at the child. That don't mean he want to abuse the child.
No, but raising your voice at a child doesn't necessarily be the only way you communicate. Because, so for example, with a child, for example, they're still growing and they're still learning the boundaries of, again, safety. So what do they need to feel safe and navigate the world from a place where they understand it? So it's not raising, you getting aggressive with your child doesn't necessarily mean in any way, shape or form you as a human can't be impatient, you can't be tolerant, or you're not going to get aggressive. But you also have to learn how to manage your emotions a bit. Because communicating aggressive with your child can in some way, because they're going to ask, why are you being so harsh with me? I just want to pick up the water. But you're like, no, don't touch the water. Don't do that. Why are you doing that for? You need to listen to me. But that's your experience of but how helpful has that been for you?
Boy. I don't answer that. What are some of the symptoms of PTSD?
So, so we have disassociation. So you might notice someone who sometimes seems like they're not here, but they might drift off somewhere else. So what that can look like is you're talking to them, having a conversation, but they have a blank expression on their face and they're not really emotionally present. You can have flashbacks, so they can show up as memories that don't really make sense, either in your dreams or nightmares, and that they seem really intense. You can be very emotionally sensitive. So things like, for example, now I'm a person that's very resilient, but if I'm being particularly sensitive about something that's not about, so let's say someone was saying to me, I don't like your chain, your chain's ugly. And I'll be like, but it's never bothered me before. I'll be like, why are you getting onto my chain for? It'll be those little things that tend to stand out. And then also a lack of sleep. That's always a big one with people with PTSD. You can't ever seem to rest or relax or feel at ease. But the biggest one that people never really touch on or never speak about is the anxiety. It's the constant state of anxiety. And for women, they're very expressive about how anxious they feel, about what scares or frightens them. But with men, they don't recognize anxiety unless it's a physical threat.
Or they recognize it, but if they talk about it, they feel like they're weak.
Exactly that. So they'll recognize that as weakness. Like using a house fire, you might hear the fire alarm go off, and internally you're frightened, you're scared, you got tears coming down your face, and your child comes to Dad, why are you crying? Like, oh, nothing. It's just the steam getting my eye. That's it. But deep down, it's I'm really scared of the next time I hear that fire alarm go off, I might die, and it's a very real thing to feel that way.
Okay.
But you don't want to acknowledge how you're feeling.
Okay. All right. So if one get caught up within a fire, like you was in a burning, your house get burned down, isn't you supposed to get counseling or something to combat that feeling or emotion, or every time you see fires, you don't get frightened and think that you're reliving that life again?
You do, and there's specialized treatment for that. So there's something known as EMDR therapy, and what that stands for is elective. I can't remember the acronym off the top of my head, but basically it's a form of therapy where there's a light sensor that basically scans, and you're carefully guided through your memories and the experiences that you've been through. Now the challenge with that is that some people aren't often ready for that, and it can be very intense. Now when you do get counselling, one, the person that you're dealing with is only seeing you on a week-to-week basis on an experience that you're dealing with daily, and you're only given 1 hour to go over that. But with PTSD, it comes in two forms. It comes in just acute, so it's just been one experience, and then there's complex, where there's been more than one experience that's stacked on one of each other. And in Black families, we have a lot of people that do present with complex PTSD. So you might have someone who's lost a family member, been through a difficult experience. So you have someone who's going through grief, going through the trauma of having something devastating happen to them. So they might have been assaulted, they might have been beaten up, they might have been robbed, and then on top of that lost their job. And then when you have those things that have a compound effect, as we'd call it, it can be difficult for them to deal with their emotions like that.
Okay. How long does PTSD last?
It can last a long while if it goes untreated. So if you bury it, it can stay with you your whole life. There's no such, but if you do tackle it, it can get treated, because there's no real timeline to put things with how you navigate PTSD.
Okay. All right. Say for instance, the macho man, then he don't treat it and he don't report it. What will happen to him in the end?
In the end, he will find himself. The best way to answer this. In the end, he will find himself very isolated, because he really is finding it difficult to connect with himself. With patriarchal society as we know it, the macho man, he sees himself as the leader, the alpha male, the strongest person in the room, but he has to challenge that aspect of himself that is vulnerable. And some men find vulnerability uncomfortable. So he now has to say to himself, one, I'm not okay, but he won't admit it. And then you also notice your family and your friends asking you, what's going on? We're noticing you're getting upset. We're noticing that you're not talking to us. You're very isolated here on your own. And the more he begins to drift from all those that he knows and loves and the things that he enjoys, the more isolated he becomes, to the point that's what trauma can do to you. It isolates you when it goes untreated. And you do find with Black men, especially towards the end of their life, because they don't treat or tackle their traumas or their behaviours or the things that affect them, that they, at the end of their life, they have no one visiting them. They're not connected with their children, even their partners in some cases, and they're isolated and alone. And that's the impact of having no treatment for your mental health.
Are there effective ways to treat PTSD?
There are. There's talking therapy. So what I offer talking therapy and PTSD stabilization. So you go through psychoeducation, mindfulness techniques such as a grounding bag can be useful. So a grounding bag is where it's like a small pouch or thing with a bunch of stuff inside it that can help soothe you or bring you out of your difficult memories. There's also safe place idealization. So basically you visualization, safe place visualization, where you visualize a safe space, where you can just say, okay, this is my safe place, this is how I am, this is where I'm at. There's also a perfect nurture exercise as well. There's many things on offer when it comes to dealing with PTSD.
Wow. Why do some people experience PTSD and others do not?
Some people have more resilient mind than others. So some people have gone through experiences that can be quite devastating, and the way that they've grown to develop themselves, it can be challenging in the sense of, all right, I know how to deal with loss. I know how, so for example, if someone dies, so for example, I lost my father when I was a young child, and I've had various deaths in between that happened in my family. But I've always known how to deal with those feelings because I've had that experience before. But for some people, when that does happen, sometimes they've been raised in environments that allows them to be emotionally open, allows them to be mentally expressive. So what that looks like is saying, oh, I'm very sad about Uncle Billy dying, and I don't know how to deal with that. My mum would go, okay, let's talk about it. What is it about Uncle Billy that you miss? I miss how he used to take me out to go here and there. Okay, where did he used to take you that really stands out to you? He used to take me go to the pool hall, and my mum would be like, why is he taking you to the pool hall for? But the pool hall was where we could go, and he took me to the pool hall. And he'd probably get and he'd give me a little sip of his Heineken or something like that. But it's those little memories, just having that space to just say, this is what's real. That's how someone might cope with PTSD as a child. To say, this is what it is. But adults may not do that. And that's what keeps them stuck in that cycle of always experiencing that trauma.
Okay. What are some of the characteristics of somebody with PTSD?
The statistics of someone with PTSD. Whilst the facts and figures when it comes to the black community, especially within the UK, are very small, I believe currently it stands as of 2021, because that's the last study that I saw that was done, is around, say, 21% at the moment of people in the UK suffer with PTSD that are diagnosed. But within the black community, it can be, there's a high majority of us that do suffer with PTSD, and it does go untreated, specifically because of the experiences that do happen to us.
Okay. So where can people go and learn more about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD?
Okay, so besides what I do, so I run my online support groups, and one of the topics coming up soon will be around PTSD, and there are also some workshops that I'm going to be doing on that. There's also the website at Mind, they cover the subject quite well as well. There's also a few other spaces that online, so there's Psychology and Go, they do some stuff around what PTSD is, and they touch very heavily on the subject as well. You can find them on TikTok, some of them have websites. There's also charities available such as the Samaritans, the St. Mungo's website, the NHS as well, they offer very comprehensive stuff as well. And then there's also various well-being charities that are known throughout the world. But the one I'd highlight, especially for a black person, is the Black Wellbeing Collective. They do things and run workshops that do actually try to address what those issues are quite comprehensively.
Okay. How does one partner spot that their partner is going through PTSD?
That's a good question. So when a partner, in relationships, they're quite intimate rather than friendships and with some family members. So they see you on a more intimate level. So to spot what your partner's doing, you might notice things like they might be a bit more withdrawn from you. So from my experience, a partner with PTSD might be very more withdrawn or reluctant to tell you how they're feeling because they feel you won't understand. They might pull away, they might isolate themselves, they might become unknowingly aggressive with you. At times the energy around them might
Violent?
To some extent, yeah, depending on, even, doesn't matter whether it's a man or woman, they can get violent and abusive, verbally and physically and emotionally. but that's in the very extreme cases. But in loving and safe partnerships, they do tend to isolate and withdraw. So they can become quite avoidant and in terms anxious. So that's avoidance. But in terms of anxiety, they might try to hold on to you a bit more. They might want to spend more time with you to the point where it feels overwhelming. They might call you suddenly or randomly and to a very difficult extent. So whereas before you might send a morning text and talk to them in the evening, when they're going through an episode, they might be calling you every moment of the day, whether they're at work, yes or no, and then sending you and bombarding you with a lot of messages because they just want that reassurance that things are okay. And the way that can take on a partner and the way to manage that is to always have a boundary. So just literally check in and say, is everything okay? Or is everything okay? Oh no, I'm just panicking. All right, well, I'm quite busy at doing in this meeting with this client, at doing this job, but I can call you for about 10 minutes, 15, whatever time you have available, just to hear what's going on. But it's also important to have boundaries as a partner as well, and know when to say, you know what, I understand this is very difficult for you, but please just give me a moment and a bit of time to myself.
Wow. Stephen, maximum respect to you again for coming through Ropes podcast to come take the time out of your busy schedule, come talk about mental illness and how it affects the black community.
Appreciate you having me.
Understand? Because there's a lot of us in the black community who we don't even understand these things. We don't got time to understand these things, and we see it happening all around us.
Yeah.
We see it happening from people go to prison, people come out of prison, people trying to fit back into society. Societies don't welcome them back, and they go through all these kind of depression.
Yeah.
And from your experience, can you shed some light on some of what I just said?
Yeah. So when someone with mental health goes into prison, they don't just typically just come straight out. They sometimes go into what we call a forensic unit. So these are specialized units that deal with people that have criminal offences with severe mental health conditions, and they do get support. They're housed. They're put through a very strict program that they do have to adhere to. Otherwise, they do get recalled back into prison as well. So the challenge with that though is that sometimes, even depending on the stigma of the crime, is that it can be quite difficult for these people to get rehabilitated. So for example, recently being a few years ago, pedophilia is now seen as a mental health condition. And that is something that's very controversial for a lot of practitioners, including myself, because of the risk it poses to children as well. But the rehabilitation for that is not something I can speak too much towards because that's not my area of expertise, but there are things in place to protect these children. It's just that they're not often acted upon.
Okay, all right. Let's talk about EUPD. Okay. Earlier on, you tell us what it is. I want you to remind us what it is again.
Alright, so EUPD is a personality disorder. So that stands for emotionally unstable personality disorder, and it deals with the intensity of the emotions that you experience. And what that can look like is someone who just has really volatile and intense relationships. They're very combative at times. They can at times get into fights. They're not really good with boundaries sometimes as well, but more often than not, it can really be demonstrated by the intensity of the relationships that they have around them with family, friends, work, you name it.
Okay, what are some of the common symptoms of EUPD, and how does it affect the black man and family in the UK?
Great question. So the common symptoms tend to be, especially amongst black men, we tend to have volatile relationships. So you might know someone that, for whatever reason, no matter where they go out, they just seem to always end up either in an altercation, a fight, altercation, an argument, or a dispute with someone that gets incredibly aggressive over just the smallest thing. So it could just be like, for example, the security guard at the door might go, I really like your top, but because they're feeling internally sensitive, so that's another symptom, but that's for them to notice, that's not something you can pick up on. They're feeling internally sensitive about the way that they look overall. and all the security done is give them a compliment, but they've taken that and twisted it into something negative because that's how they feel. And they'll just be like, oh, what, you're trying to start something, and it can lead into a fight at the extreme end, or they just really get into a verbal altercation. Another way is that it can be amongst family and friends, is that this person might at times feel very easily slighted by anything. So let's say you're paying more attention to someone else than another, for example, they might feel that you don't love them. So like, you don't love me because you don't show me that much attention. You're always giving, so for example, it's me and my brother, you're always showing Javel more attention than you do me. You don't love me, you don't care about me, and it's because of X, Y, and Z, when the reality is that's not the case. It's just we have to balance our attention. And in partnerships, it can differ in the sense of they might be incredibly jealous about how intimate you are with other people in your life, including family. So they might try to isolate you in some extremes, claim ownership over you. So what that would look like is you can't talk to no one. Oh, why are you talking to them? Why are you talking to me? Come off the phone. It can really twist into some very negative and unhealthy issues. So the intensity of your relationships around you can be the big marker of how EUPD shows up.
Okay. How can it be treated and managed effectively?
It can be treated via medication. I'm always going to advocate for medication. A lot of people have the perception of medication being a bad thing, but it's not. It really does help in some cases. So you might be offered something called melatonin or some sertraline, things along those lines to help manage your mood. But then also there's a treatment and therapy called DBT therapy or dialect behavior therapy, and what that does is it helps you navigate how you manage your emotions in the world. So the challenge for those with EUPD is that they don't know how to perceive the behaviors and emotions of others very well, because the internal focus is on them.
Okay. Do you believe that some of the reason why black men don't really come forward is because they're perceived as being weak?
I wouldn't just say weakness. I think it's sometimes a lack of understanding too. I would say that black men often don't have a safe space to just be held or handled gently, or they don't know of spaces where they can be handled gently, because we tend to be harshly criticized by society at large, not only by ourselves but also our families, our friends, society, the police. Even on the bus, we just feel heavily criticized and held under a certain standard, and when we fail to meet that standard, we feel like our feelings don't matter, our thoughts don't matter.
Okay. What are some of the common causes of depression and anxiety in black men in the UK?
The common causes of depression and anxiety amongst black men, and depression and anxiety amongst black men that I'm aware of in the UK, can be to do around mostly what they perceive as their areas of success. So it can be from not having a stable income, it can come from not having a stable environment as well. So their home life might not be very good, where they have a sense of freedom in that. Another sense is that there's often a lot of pressure placed onto them, so they might be responsible for caring for family members that they don't know how to. So they might be caring for a sick family member who has cancer or has a very difficult disease to manage on their own, and they take on that responsibility because culturally speaking, we are supposed to be responsible for all our family members, when in reality there's support available, and we don't take advantage of that.
Okay, what treatment would effectively would you agree that would help the black man in his depression?
What would help a black man with their depression? You know what, I'm just going to say it would be asking certain questions, to be quite fair. So it's not just simply asking why are you sad or what's upset you. It's more along the lines of looking at the kind of life that you would like to lead. What specifically are you doing to reach that? And they typically in one assessment, I'm going to even use an example. There was one young man that came to me, and I do ask permission to share this stuff whenever I'm dealing with people. So there was one young man who came to me for an assessment, and he was like, he's come to me with severe depression. So one question that I posed to him, that I posed to any black man or person to reflect on is, observing your life as it is right now, as it stands, and the things that are keeping you depressed, what is it that you feel would fulfill you and make you happy? And for him, he at first said something, just having more money, being able to drive, have his own space. I'm like, okay, let's go a bit deeper than that. So let's say you had all of that. You had the car, the house, the money, the woman. Okay, let's say you had all of that already, do you still feel like you'd be depressed? He said yes. And I asked why. He said, because I don't know how to manage who I am outside of these things. I don't know who I am. I haven't explored the parts of me that make me happy. So one thing I'll say to anybody, black or otherwise, is take time to explore who you are, what you need, what you value, and the boundaries around that, and that can help you manage your depression. Definitely.
Okay. How does mental health affect families in the black community?
Well, there's two aspects, ways to answer that. How mental health can positively affect families: it allows you to understand the emotions of your family around you. It allows you to definitely be emotionally intelligent and mature and connect and enhance your lives individually, because everyone has healthy boundaries and space and freedom to be able to express themselves. But on the negative aspect, if you're not addressing your mental health within your family, it can feel quite volatile, it can feel unhealthy and toxic. So what that would be is aggressive, it would be harsh, there might be a lot of fear and anxiety in the home. People might be isolated and feel depressed, and especially between husband and wife, especially, there might be a lot of conflict as well. Sometimes, at the very worst case, getting physically, emotionally, psychologically abusive. So those are the ways that it can affect the home.
Okay. What are some of the unique challenges that black families face when dealing with mental issues? Mental health issues.
I would say there's three. A lack of trust in the capability of services to support them, a lack of knowledge in anything to do with supporting their families and their mental health, and also just a generalized stigma against what mental health looks like within the community in regard to anyway. So for example, you might have a family member who has a physical disability, so they might be deaf and mute, and they might have to now develop sign language. So I can't talk to my family normally. And as a black individual, that can be quite challenging, because what do you mean you can't talk normally? And you might hear things like it's a demon in you, and that's the reason why this is happening to you. But the reality is, it's not that there's anything wrong with you. Sometimes people are just affected by things quite differently. And the challenge of being in the black community is that sometimes it's the spiritual side of it. It's not a demon or anything like that. Sometimes we're just born with different challenges that we as a community don't typically face. So speaking with sign languages, in some cases, someone might see the sign language as you're weaving curses. And if you're telling a young child and they grow up as an adult, I'm being told I'm weaving curses because I move my hands in a particular way, can really depress you and make you anxious. You're going to feel afraid to express yourself. You're not going to know how to say to everyone, because everyone around you lacks the capacity to understand how to communicate with you, so you already feel distant. But also there's not a lot of spaces to feel embraced either.
Okay. So how can families support each other in managing mental health issues?
So the framework that I use actually whenever I work with patients, and I think that it will be useful for families. So we have a framework as practitioners known as the CHIME framework, and it's a recovery model that helps people identify their goals around their mental health. So it stands for connection, hope and optimism, identity, meaning and empowerment. And one of the things I'd say to any family is focusing on feeling connected and making sure that person feels empowered by you, and then those other aspects would fall in between that. So the more connected I feel to my family, the more hopeful and optimistic I am about my future, the sense of identity that I have, the more meaning I get from feeling connected to my family, and then the more empowered I am to go out into the world and thrive. Those are what I would say would be beneficial for any family to navigate dealing with someone with mental health or any family member.
Okay. Why is it that black men in the UK are more likely to be diagnosed with several mental health problems and more likely to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act than any other group?
Well, cut that real short because that would be long.
Yeah. Let's get to the point.
Get to the point. We're black, and we're growing up in a white patriarchal society. We're not accepted here. So in that, you got a lot of people that don't understand who we are, where we come from, and what we experience, telling you what you possibly have. So to use that as an experience, when I first started training as a mental health wellbeing practitioner, in one of my early cases, there was a woman who was being diagnosed with EUPD, and there's a lot of stigma that comes with that diagnosis, especially for women, because you're being told that you're basically emotionally mad and no one can help you. But when I did my assessment with her, the traits that she was showing up for was just having very complex PTSD. She went through a very difficult experience in healthcare where she was dealt with in a way where people did not actually care or treat her like a person. And that had a significant impact in how she responded to treatment. So she would be emotionally unstable, but it was due to the trauma she experienced, not due to just her emotions. So when it comes to answer your question, that's the challenge that we face, is that typically speaking, we're growing up in a white society that doesn't know how to be inclusive of us or any other minority at that, or how our different challenges intersect in our mental health as well, which is why I started Malevolence in the first place. So yeah.
So in your assessment, do you think it's racism? Why? Because we're not accepted here, and that's a fact. And there's black youth that born here and they call themselves English, and the reality of it, you're not accepted in this society. We are just living here. We want to be accepted.
But to that, I would say, why do you seek that acceptance from them? What do you accept yourself? Because here, we're not, like you said, we're not accepted here. But I would argue, why do you desire this acceptance? It is where you live. It is how you're seen, and so on and so forth. But are we accepting them in our community as well? Because in the Black British community, even though there's a lot of knowledge around mental health, and there's spaces like yourself that are now opening that conversation, it is still seen as a stigma if you take medication. As a black individual, if you're taking medication, and someone will say to you, if you want to alleviate an anxiety, smoke weed. But if you but what they don't tell you is that some of the chemicals in weed, if you take it consistently, because some people, to deal with 1 or 2 joints a day, fair enough. But there are some people where they're doing like 5 or 6, and they don't realize how much that affects the brain chemistry. And without that,
isn't that the weed that affect the brain chemistry? Is the chemical in the weed what they use to grow the weed that affect the brain?
I would disagree.
If the weed organic.
No, it's not the fact that, it's not a matter of whether it's organic or not. It's a matter of how much you're consuming. So it's because if you have too much of anything, because even in the Bible it says, with the whole lesson with Sodom and Gomorrah, the problem wasn't that in Sodom, that it wasn't that they were in any way, shape or form committing overall just sin. It was the excessiveness of it that led to them being destroyed.
Okay.
So it's the same thing with when you consume drugs. It's the excessiveness of how that damage or what it does to you. If you're smoking 10 spliffs a day and you think that's not going to affect you, I would challenge you to disagree, because there are studies that do support that. We would call that a drug-induced form of psychosis in some instances.
Okay. Black people in the UK are more likely to be diagnosed with a mental problem. Why?
To refer back earlier, we live in a society that doesn't really understand us or our experiences. So, black people, for example, if you take two people coming from a similar background, one white, one black, this white person would just be told, oh, you have a bit of, depression or anxiety, and more often or not, and there might be a more supportive environment in how they are correctly assessed. However, if you take a black person and place them in a room full of white professionals, and you have this person saying, God is speaking to me and telling me that I'm a chosen one, and that when the moon turns red is when I'm gonna be released from wherever it is I'm at, whatever I'm going through. To that person, they'll say to themselves, okay, this person has
mental issues.
they have a mental issues, or they might have psychosis or paranoid schizophrenia. However, if you place a black clinician in that room, they'll be able to follow up with other questions to help really delve into the core of those issues, to help really guide the pathway of their treatment.
Okay.
So that's what the challenge is.
So you're saying that the white person doesn't understand the mentalness in a black person.
The cultural. Yeah. Because that's the challenge that the NHS currently has, is that culturally speaking, we are very diverse in the people that are coming in, but there's not as many clinicians from a diverse background in the NHS to meet those needs. So I as a black clinician meeting with surprisingly a lot of black men and women in the NHS, but there's not. I'm the only one mental health. I'm the only black male mental health wellbeing practitioner on my team.
Wow. So that's why they section people so easy. It's a simple thing, section. Yeah. It's crazy.
Because it's literally, I don't understand this. It seems crazy to me. So send him off, and then they're now stuck in this system or this loop of constantly trying to get balance, getting treatment, but then also having a bunch of people suggesting treatment that don't really understand the experience of what they're going through.
Wait, so this could be classed as institutional racist?
It is. That literally is what it is. The system is still institutionally racist.
Okay.
I'll also say institutionally ignorant would also be a good way to put that.
Okay. That takes me to this question. Black people in the UK are less likely to access mental health service than white people.
Yeah. That's historical though, because there were some cases, and this is something that actually comes up a lot. There are some cases where people would be set. So, for example, the whole history when black people were coming over here, especially in the days of the Windrush, you used to have a lot of people that were sectioned just so that they could be experimented on. Because what people tend to forget about the history in the UK and what's not taught in school often is that they used to really take some of these people and advantage of them, section them just to experiment, to understand us, that we weren't seen as animals in some we were seen as akin to animals. So we'd be drugged up with many treatments, we would be put through ice treatment, hot treatment, ice therapy, heat therapy, straight jackets, injected.
So in other words, they mad us off then. They send us crazy because they want to find out how we function.
Exactly. And then you also...
Wait, 1 second. Let's come back to that. Welcome back, and this is our final furlong. What we gather from these questions and how mental issue or mental health affect the black person or the black family more, they depress us because they're trying to find out things with us. So we got this culture of sickness going along for a very long time. From slave back to slave, we can trace it back to slavery days.
Yeah, we could. We really could. But if you
Or does we eradicate this though?
So there are many organizations besides myself that are trying their best to kind of develop anti-racist policies, mine being at the front of that, to kind of basically be like, okay, we need to challenge the stigmas that not only the black community face, but many people kind of do face within accessing healthcare. But one of the challenges that we do have within our community at our level is that some of us don't really advocate for ourselves at all at any level. So in our community, so in particular, using like how Brixton is gentrified or Peckham or throughout all these little pockets where we actually do have these spaces, a lot of us don't really say, hold on, they're changing how what our communities, the very fabric of our communities do look like. And for some people that makes you feel very unsafe. And that's the key thing about mental health that I think everyone should take from this, is that it is about how safe you feel in your environment. And sometimes what really affects how you navigate that is, I don't feel safe when I go home because I'm constantly scared that I'm going to lose it, or that the people around me aren't people I'm going to be familiar with, or they will understand me. And that's a common fear for, well, I think some black people that we do tend to navigate growing up in the UK.
Wow. Okay. EUPD is more common in women than men.
That's true.
But black men are more likely to be diagnosed with it than white men. Why?
Because when it comes to EUPD and why we would be diagnosed more is, again, using my early example, you have someone in that room who doesn't typically understand what the black community looks like. So if you have someone who, for example, you know the concept of when someone breaks out into the spirit or is having that, those little bouts of elation they might view as, oh, well, you're clearly deteriorating emotionally, EUPD. When the reality is that's just a way of coping probably with a trauma response when you investigate a bit further, and they might be getting misdiagnosed with a form of psychosis. And what tends to actually happen with people is you have a lot of men and women in those rooms who are of different backgrounds that don't understand black people.
Wow. Wow. Okay. PTSD is more common in black people than white people in the UK. Why?
Slavery. We have generational trauma, and a lot of our behaviour can be traced back to slavery. So the way we used to get whipped, be held in chains, that especially in the Caribbean community, you can see a lot of that trickle forward in our behaviour and how we manage our children. And whilst there are many of us trying to change how we navigate dealing with those things, a lot of our behaviour isn't healthy about how we deal with each other. So the challenge that we face with that is, and why it's so common enough, is that we keep passing on that trauma and then adding new layers on top. And then until someone actually goes, hold on, this isn't correct, this isn't okay, this isn't safe, and this isn't alright, that keeps continuing. So that's how you end up repeating that trauma and passing on PTSD throughout. It's that repeated behaviour that keeps passing on to your children, your children's children, your grandchildren, their children, and keeps continuing.
You know, when I was at university, and majority of my tutors was Africans, and I could see the difference when we're in lessons. The white tutor don't care.
Yeah.
You just put the thing on the board and you must get it done. But the African tutor will take the time and they will explain it over and over. Even if you don't understand, no matter how long it takes for you to understand it, they will go through it with you. They will have one-on-one with you. But the white tutor does expect that. This is university. You shouldn't be having problem. You should be know everything. You should be sliding through. And I can see the result now, and I can see everything is going from slave days, their mentality, the way they deal with us, and what they want from us. And so this is why we've been diagnosed with all these issues. Some of them are rubbish.
Some of them can be rubbish, and some of them, as you're highlighting there, do have a lot of perceptions and behaviours that aren't healthy for us as people to really experience. Because imagine for yourself as a student, you're like, wait, what have I done to this man for you to be dealing with me in such a way where like you're not helping me? Whereas, like you said, the back to you are showing patience, grace and understanding in helping you achieve the best result possible. That's what a teacher's supposed to do. But not a lot of people sometimes, and you're going to find nowadays, it doesn't matter what colour you are, but typically white lecturers, they do tend to hold a bit less patience for those of colour, especially black.
One of the subject I was one of the top students in the class, and I expect to have the highest marks.
Yeah.
And I only get 40. Even though it still puzzles me.
Why did it puzzle you?
Because I did everything right, and when I bring it to the African tutor, and he looked at it and he said, "Huh, something wrong here, mate. Everything is on this page is correct. Reference is good. Everything is good."
But did you challenge why the other tutor?
Yes, but I did challenge it, and I go to the model designer, and I bring the work to the model designer and show it. And said, "This is, I don't understand why I get 40 in this model."
The critique that they gave you as feedback.
No, the feedback they gave me that, okay, they look at it and said, okay, we're going to investigate this.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And I didn't hear nothing. I didn't hear nothing more. And I just leave it. Because the next subject where I was weak in, I ended up get about 56 in it. So I said, okay, maybe it's a fair balance.
It's a fair balance.
You understand?
But how that can affect the average person, for you, I would ask, how did you feel when you're not really getting an explanation about it?
My feeling from that is like the education system is institutionally racist. They know what they want to do with you already.
Yeah.
You understand? So no matter how hard they try, they already have your mark for you.
Okay.
No, in my experience and other people's experience, because we talk about it, but we're not here for that today. We're here on the mental issue, but because we're touching on that and see how people diagnose people and how it affect only the black community, and why does it affect only the black community more? We have more people have mental issues in the black community more than any other community. Yes, but Stephen, I hope you can change the concept of and the narrative of how people view us. You're young. Yeah. You pushing yourself forward. You're doing a lot of. You could just collect a paycheck and go home, but you love your people. You want to see the best. You want to give them the best, and so I just wish you the best.
You know what?
You understand? And just tell us where we can find you and how people can come to your workshop and.
Okay.
Get involved, voluntarily get involved in what you're doing.
Oh, well, you can follow me on Instagram, at Maleference on Instagram and on TikTok. Please do send me a message. There's a link tree as well that we have where you can book an appointment with me for a one-to-one. You can also go on Eventbrite. You can see my event page on there where you can book on for a support group. And yeah, if you want to help out or support in any way, shape or form, do send me a message by any one of those two pages. I'll be more than happy to meet with you and just go over anything. So yeah, that's it.
Stephen, enough respect, man.
Well, thank you for having me.
Enough respect. Let's continue the good work, and you must come back to this podcast. Okay?
I will.
Okay. Enough love and respect.
Dear answer, are you that?